Hello and welcome to my Bloomburrow 17Lands early format data review. I like to do these a week after the format comes out, take a deep dive on, my impressions of the format and talk about what the data says about different cards and archetypes. I find that usually a good place to start on these is with the deck color data section, specifically the two color section, as most formats are two color pair related. This format is definitely a format that's very two color pair focused. And one thing you'll notice about Bloomburrow when you compare it to other formats, especially recent formats like MH3 and OTJ, is that early after 1 week here, the highest win rate deck is actually 58.2%, which is lower than usual at this stage. Usually we see one that's still pretty close to 60, and this is generally a good thing because it means that the format is more balanced and there's not just one really, really good deck that people are going to just complain about. It's really, honestly, it doesn't really indicate format balance that well, in my opinion. It just indicates the lack of complaining equity. Like, people just have less complaint equity when there's a deck that doesn't win more than 59% for, everybody. But this is actually, it is a flatter set, right? So 58, 57, 56, 56. Sort of like these four archetypes here. Selesnya with the close but clearly ahead of Golgari in terms of just overall win rate, and it's played a little bit more as well. Actually, no, they're played basically the same amount. So these decks I would say sort of classify as your tier 1 at the moment, and then your tier 2 would sort of be Rakdos, Simic, Orzhov, and maybe you could put... No, I think that's probably it. I would put in tier 2. You could maybe put... that tier 3 would probably be Boros, Gruul, Dimir, and then I would put tier 4 as Azorius and Izzet. I actually just wouldn't play Izzet, as it's probably the only archetype I don't think you should be drafting at all right now. There will be people that will tell you that you should draft it more. Azorius I think is a bad deck, although I have 3 Azorius trophies in this set. I don't know how that happened. It's really weird. I have more trophies with Azorius than any other archetype. I think I have more trophies with Azorius than any other than the rest of my other trophies, and I have more trophies with Azorius. So, what does that say about me? I don't know. I've had success with the archetype. I don't think that doesn't make it good. You know what I mean? That is one thing. As I don't think the archetype is good, despite me having success with it. That doesn't make me think it's good. It just means that I think I've been fortunate and have had drafted it when I should. But yeah, so this is kind of where things stand. In play rate wise, again, very flat. It's just a very balanced overall set. Obviously we have the one bad deck. We've had formats recently where there hasn't been one as bad deck as this. This is the worst we've seen in a little while, I think. But yeah, nothing that is the top is pretty flat. Let's go to the top users. Players that win around 50. What is the win rate of this format? 58.8, 59%, which is a little bit on the low end for them. We see that they're winning actually 60% with just your two color decks, which is again where sort of you expect them to be. And as is always the case with top users, it becomes even flatter as you get up the win rate ladder here. The win rates flatten out due to, again, people that are better at draft archetypes when they're open, and so that means that they're drafted close to the appropriate rate. Now, if they were actually drafted, at rates close to appropriate, these win rates would all be the same, right? If in a truly balanced format, every single two color not, and I don't think that's necessarily true, but I mean this actually is extremely indicative of a balanced format. We have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like half of the archetypes are basically at 60% or greater. And then we have 1, 2, 3 at 58 in the 57, 58 range. I mean, that's just really, really balanced. That means you can really draft anything, and that's usually true. Like, usually we'll see that for top users, again, it flattens out considerably because you'll notice these rates are more distinct. Like, these two are still the most drafted, Selesnya and Golgari, because they're the best decks, and they're, just on aggregate going to be strongest, and you should draft them most frequently. We see Rakdos here as the third most popular deck for top users, and then that is followed by essentially a tie with Orzhov and Boros. I'm surprised to see Simic a little bit low here. Actually, it's not that much lower than Boros. I'm kind of surprised to see Boros this high. I don't think Boros is that good. I think it's probably a little overdrafted by top users at the moment. If we go back to everybody, we'll see that Boros is actually probably I think just a little overdrafted in general at the moment. It has a very very high draft rate for an extremely modest win rate. I think right now it would be advisable to avoid drafting Boros in most scenarios at the moment. And that's sort of where the decks stand. Let's go quickly look at format speed because it's always interesting to look at. I used to just do this beforehand, but now I don't remember. Is it down here? Here it is. Yeah, it's down here. So very fast. Again, it's actually interesting. It's not MH3, but it is very fast. Formats are becoming faster. We've kind of seen this over the last year or so. Like, this is really fast. This is a very very quick format. It's as fast as MKM at the moment. Well, no, it's not in terms of number of turns, but in terms of win rate on the play, it's actually like it's almost as fast as all V1, which is kind of crazy to me. Like that this format, statistically is that fast. Now again, a lot of this is because you're gonna have a lot of day one data in this that club. This is not a good representation of for vibes. You know what I mean? Like this graph does not indicate format vibes, is sort of how I like to put it. But it does indicate. But what this chart indicates to me is how good the 2-drops are, basically. Like, we see MH3 all the way down here. It's the shortest turn length set ever, which is partially why this set feels slower, is because it's off the back of MH3, which MH3 is extremely fast. This format is not as fast as MH3, and so it's going to feel a little bit slower. Where was OTJ? It's up here. Yeah, OTJ I think is probably closer to what they're aiming for, speed-wise. I would guess. I think this is kind of the target, and I think they're a little on the fast side when they end up down here. So I think they've probably missed a little bit on that target. Though I think having Bloomburrow is designed to be more of a core set or a beginner-friendly set because of the animal theming and whatnot, which it attracts a lot of people that aren't necessarily super hardcore players, which is good. Obviously, good for the game to do that, but it for that reason, like having the games be a little shorter and less complex tends to make those players a little bit happier. Just because, you get to play more games, and that's you learn faster the more games you play. All right, so let's start with the commons. In game and hand win rate, that's if you haven't been here for one of these, I'm a game and hand win rate enjoyer. I like the stat a lot. I think it provides a really good index for my feeling about cards. My feeling about cards tends to align very well with their game and hand win rate. So if a card has a good game and hand win rate, I tend to feel strongly that that's how good it is in most scenarios. There are some scenarios where I disagree. Counter spells are probably the biggest area of disagreement for me. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. As of right now, we have a tie for the two best commons in the set. They're very similar: Carrot Cake and Savor, 59.5. Again, we see a balance here. Now, not color-wise, right? All of the best commons are in the Abzan. Surely it's Abzan. Abzan color pairs, basically, white, black, green, green. This is a blue-green card only. It's a blue-green gold card, so that's a little bit of an outlier. Black, white, green, and then we get to a red card. But a lot of the top cards, from one perspective, are in those three colors. All of those decks are good. Their archetypes win quite a bit. I feel that those are the best cards. But again, we see a lot of flatness, right? A lot of flatness in win rates. There's no common that is clearly, ahead. They're half a percentage point ahead. If we look at, MH3 is a bad example, but even if we look at OTJ, if it loads, which it may not ever, OTJ commons, I don't even know whether or not I'm going to be proven right by this, and I'm just sitting here waiting for it to load. This is truly phenomenal. Interesting. All right, I guess we're not going to look at OTJ. MH3, but MH3 is not a good example because Chrysalis is the best common we've ever seen. So maybe, all right, yeah. Even in MKM, full percentage point clear at the end of the format, which of course this is not. This is already a closer. These will come down to 58 by the end of the format, probably in the 58s, because the win rates decrease over the course of the format. Just in general. Why am I what? BLB? Are we BLB? Nope, we're not. We're not BLB. There we go. All right, so let's start with the colors. Let's talk about each of the colors at common. As I've mentioned previously, white Carrot Cake is the best common in the set. It's tied with Savor. I think Savor. I don't know. I think pack one, pick one. I honestly think either is justifiable. I would probably take Savor because I think cheap interaction, as we talked about with the format speed graph, I think is slightly more important. But I don't know. I think you could justify taking either of them, and you would. It's reasonable to do so. Um, Interestingly, I would say Banishing Light not being in the top three commons. Um, I I actually predicted this, believe it or not, with the Magic MTG Data Science does a chip pack 0 pick one challenge or whatever. I didn't put a Banishing Light on my list, and I thought about it. I agonized over the decision, and I ended up not putting it on. Um, and yeah, I think it's a good card, but we can see sort of here that it's not the best. I actually am interested in how it performs for top users. I assume it's going to be very similar. It actually is basically exactly the same in terms of performance for top users. So slightly above average card, not a huge priority. You probably shouldn't be pack one pick oneing Banishing Light. Its ALS is probably too high. Do I think it's still a good card? Yeah, I think it's fine. But I think that so far we're seeing that it is probably a little overvalued. Um, like we can see that Sonar Strike is performing similarly and it's actually taken sort of similarly, which is kind of crazy to me. But yeah. Anything that I am surprised about to the bad? I'm actually a little surprised by how bad Affiliated Provisioner's been performance-wise. Like this is lower than we usually see this number for this type of card. I'm a little surprised by that. I don't. Does it indicate something about not wanting to play too many 5-drops in your deck? Maybe. Um, these two guys don't super surprise me. Yeah, nothing super surprising in white. Crumb and Get It actually being this high is interesting. Um, just kind of like a 1 mana, and this would be a tier 2. This would be a tier 3 grade for me. 56.6 would be in the tier 3 range, so not anything to write home about, but solid. And Intrepid Rabbit actually is in a firm tier 2. So 2 tier 2 cards in white at the moment, and a bunch of tier 3 cards, sort of in this range here. Means the color's fine. I don't think it's the best color at common. So blue commons, obviously you're going to see a significant drop off. The best blue common by itself is Dire Downdraft. We saw from earlier that the best blue common is the frog, the blue green frog. It's obviously not displayed here because it's multicolored. Yeah, and blue suffers from some of the problems it always does, where it's just not an easy color to play, and it also just doesn't get good 2-drops. We see Bellowing Crier, just not a good 2-drop. Like, it just isn't good. It doesn't, and even in your opening hand, you'll see it's actually worse in your opening hand as a 2-drop in blue. That's indicative of a really bad card. A really bad 2-drop specifically, which does hurt blue quite a bit in pretty much every set. And since basically, the last time blue got a good 2-drop was Midnight Hunt. It's been almost 3 years at this point since blue got a good 2-drop. We've had like a full standard rotation since blue had a 2-drop in limited that I was like, man, that is a solid 2-drop. They actually nailed it, and that's Baithook Angler. And I don't even think Baithook Angler is anything special. I am somebody that really likes Baithook Angler. I like Baithook Angler as a card a lot. Like that design, I think is just like they really nailed it. So that was kind of the high point for blue 2-drops at common, and we've kind of sort of taken a step back from there. Now blue was the best color in that format by such an enormous margin that there was some overinflation going on, but I do think that card was good. Anything interesting down here? I actually have played a lot of Nightwhirl Hermits in my decks. So again, like this is one of those weird things where it's like, I've played blue-white decks and I've played this card and I've won a lot of games. Does that mean that this card is good? No. Does that mean that blue-white's good? No. Interestingly, I do actually think this card is playable, and I don't think it's bad even. Like, I actually think that there are decks for this card that you want to play it. I actually am interested for top users in blue because blue is such a card. So we actually see, interestingly, that if you look at top, hold on, let me go to maybe I'll go back to white really quickly for top users. Yeah, see this is. You'll see it's really what matters, honestly, is the order in which the cards appear. So Shore Up being up here, very interesting. It's just an interesting thing to think about. You should probably basically be playing a copy of it. in most of your decks. It depends, but yeah. But what this tells me is top users know what decks to play this card in, and that's reasonable. Light Shell Duo is kind of comfortably the second best blue common right now for all and top users. Dazzling Denial up here too. And Pearl of Wisdom doing surprisingly well. I think what that says to me is that, you know, because the blue-red deck is so bad, that like this card is going to be able to be taken late, as we see here by, you know, the 972 ADA. I mean, it's not the lowest Elsa, the highest Elsa I've ever seen in my life, so I'm still, you know, not amazing, but yeah. Cards I would basically avoid, I think. I mean, I don't think you should ever be playing either of these cards in any of your decks. This card I think is fine, but I don't like very much. You can play it in the Frog deck. There's kind of like better ways to do this in the Frog deck, so I don't love it. Yeah, blue performing not super great. That's just, you know, pretty normal. Black, we see Saver is the best common by a considerable margin. This is the first one we've seen that's been so, you know, over 1% ahead. And then Scales of Shale, the second best at the moment. It's still undervalued probably a little bit at this point. Now, obviously, this is a card that you want to play in Lizards when you can, because it gets better when you play Lizards. I'm actually interested in what its win rate is in deck like a black green. Like what is its? So here it is down here, 56. I'm actually interested. I am actually genuinely curious. It's actually still pretty good in black white. Blue black, it's going to be terrible. Yeah, it's not great, but still performing better than the archetype as a whole. So that's kind of telling to me that it's actually a card that is not it's not a card that you can only play in Lizards. Like, it is actually good enough to be better than an 18th land, I think. Like, I genuinely think that in any black deck you should play it over 8 land 18. And that's kind of what this data indicates to me. And then we have 2 black removal spells. It's been a bit since, you know, 2 black removal spells at the top of your rankings for commons. Is there anything that surprises me here? Really? No, nothing super surprising. Glide Dive Duo, I mean, we saw this coming. It's, you know, it's a good 5-mana creature. You can get these a little bit later, dead, and you know, whatever. It is replaceable because it's a 5-drop, so you don't want too many of them. You know, it has all those negative problems associated with 5-mana spells, but it is there if you need it. On to red, a color that I have played almost none of in the entire format, largely because its best common is Take Out the Trash, and all the other commons are below 55% win rate. This tells me that red is the worst color at common, anyways. And I would be inclined to agree with that. I actually do think red is worse than blue by a decent margin. I think it is a worse color than blue. Now, part of my feelings for why that's the case is that I have not drafted Lizards even like one time. I have not been. It just hasn't been open enough for me. I think and some of that's drafting preference, obviously, but I just haven't drafted that deck. I do think that deck is decent. It wins for top players pretty well. I think I'm probably underdrafting it slightly at the moment. But all of these other commons, I mean, Agate Assault is the next best red common. All of the rest of these commons are extremely replaceable to not strong. A lot of these are sort of indicating that, like, this card being down here, Spells deck doesn't work. So yeah, it's not good. This card being down here, the red-white deck doesn't work. Similarly, this card, you know, this is just an inefficient removal. The Sharpshooter. I mean, there's just a lot. I mean, we see cards. I mean, these are close to tier 5s here, like down here in red, and it's not a good scene. So just a lot of low above replacement level cards there. Now on to green. Green's best common is currently Cash Grab, and then followed by Baker's Bane Duo. Now, do I think Cash Grab is better than Baker's Bane Duo? Pack one, pick one. I do not. I think this is better because it's a actual 2-drop. But I mean, it's not a bad card. And interestingly, Tree Grow Duo at 3rd is not necessarily what I would have expected, but it does kind of make sense. Green, you'll notice, is actually very deep, all the way down to like its 10th common or above 55%, which means it has a very deep roster of commons, and actually has a couple of high win rate commons as well. So this would incline me to believe that green is currently the best color, just at common anyways. Its cards appear to indicate to me that it is the deepest and has still has strong cards at an individual level. Polyglot being ahead of Longstock Brawl, interesting. I actually think that again, cash grab winning so much indicates that you should play it in any deck. Obviously it's great in black green, which we will see here when I go look at it. But actually, it's not so much better than Baker's Bane. Like, it's actually performs worse relative to Baker's Bane Duo in black green, which is actually sort of an interesting thing. You would think it would perform better relative to other commons. Both of these cards you would think would do that. So maybe we go to white, black, green, white, and see how they perform. And here it is. It's actually all the way down here in green, white. So green, white is probably the one deck you don't want this. That was what that would indicate to me. Let's just go quickly through and make sure that that's the case. Red, green, still good. Red, green, not very good. Obviously, it's second best common. And then we look at blue, green. I think it's going to still be pretty good in blue, green. It's still pretty good in blue, green, although we're behind Polywhelp, which makes sense. Yeah. Okay. That's kind of your rundown of the commons in the format. I guess I should go look at the multicolor cards really quickly. There's some colorless stuff too. So, interestingly, none of these I think you should play outside of the archetype that you're playing. Then maybe Head of the Homestead. I think you could play in a deck that isn't the one that you want. I don't know. Some of these are extremely not great, but you can play them. I kind of wish that, 3 through 8 of these cards were like a little stronger. Like they're kind of a little weak. I feel like Pollen Prophet being the best is actually good because it makes the blue-green archetype work and functional, which I actually like. It makes it a competitive deck, which is good. So that's nice. But yeah, for the most part, you should only be playing. These are not monocolor cards. I did stop clicking that filter. Now to the colorless. Nothing really to talk about here. Actually, the share pot, you can play it. I have played it. It feels really slow. It's like really slow. Like even when you have the ability to activate it, you're like, do I really want to spend my whole 5 minutes? So like it's a little finicky. So I wouldn't recommend it. These 3 cards are decent. I think you should be playing a Grotto more often than not in most of your decks. Probably not green-white, but green-black, you should definitely be playing your first Grotto almost always. Uncharted Haven, you should. I think even in green-white, should be playing your first Uncharted Haven. Probably just your first one in green-white. I probably wouldn't play 2, but you should be playing 2 almost everywhere else. Or you could do like Uncharted Haven plus Grotto. It's just nice to get the little extra the scry. Again, the format is pretty fast, so less space for Grottos than average. To the uncommons for colorless, and actually a big hitter. There's a couple of big hitters in this. We see the lands. Oh man, I was so right about these lands. That's crazy to me. Been wrong about a lot of stuff, but these 2 lands being the best too. Like, dang, got that one right. It just made sense that these would be the best because they are value lands as opposed to these, which require you to have a creature on the board. It just is so much easier to be like, oh, in the late game I sack my land, get something back, or find something from or like draw a card. It's just so much easier than whatever. And Patchwork Banner's been excellent. It appears to be good in pretty much every deck. I think you should play it again. I'm not going to bother looking through all the decks with this card, but yeah, it's a strong Manolith, and you should probably be picking it pretty highly. It'd be hard to find a deck that you wouldn't want this in. Again, green-white even probably wants it because it's very rabbit focused. But yeah, sort of your usual amount of playables in here. Nothing super exciting. There's the 2 value lands that are good, above average. You should probably play your first copy of each of these almost automatically. The green one becomes context dependent, and the blue and red ones you maybe shouldn't even play over your first land. It's kind of close, especially the blue one. The blue one you probably don't ever want to draft. Or the red one. The red and the blue ones are concerning. Okay, now we go on to the multicolor uncommons. And this is sort of a little bit of an index for the archetypes just themselves. So we see black, green, and white, green at the top. Now Wandertail Mentor having this high of a win rate while red, green is this bad is actually indicative of the strength of this card. It is a very strong card, especially in your opening hand. 64%, highest opening hand win rate card of the bunch. Makes a lot of sense. It's a really strong card on turn 2. Then we sort of have the next tier of Lily Splash Mentor, Fireglass Mentor. You know, 2 decks that are good, but not, I don't think, quite measure up to the top 2 in terms of tier 1 status. Tricolor Mentor performing pretty well. Plume Mentor similarly. These cards. The worst one obviously is Stormcatch. Makes sense. Blue Red's not functional. This card is part of the reason why. It's too small. Doesn't have ward. For some reason, this is one of those cards. This card looks like it has ward. It doesn't have ward. Like, it's one of those cards that, like, when you see it, just like the art for me is just like, oh, this has ward. I don't know why I feel that way. Seaclave Mentor has not been great, largely due to the 2 toughness. And just being hard to have free ways to target it with stuff. When it goes off, it just wins, but it's a finicky card for sure. Starseer Mentor very similar to Seaglaive Mentor. When you have like ways to gain life without paying any mana, this card's pretty good. And when you do not, it is horrendous. And as I've talked about, 800 or 900 times, it is a 5-drop, which is your Signpost Uncommon, which has inherent problems with curve. It just has inherent problems. You'll notice that all of the top, cards cost less than 5. Lily Splash Mentor costs 4. 4 and 5 is a significant difference in curve considerations. So it takes a lot for a 5 mana Signpost to be up at the top. Let's just look at all the uncommons. I'm not super worried. I'm not super worried about colors. I guess I can. I should just go through the colors here. Again, we see sort of rabbits at the top for white with Bright White Stoat, which is just a strong card. Nothing super surprising in here. Builder's Talent actually is a card to call out that is performing better than I would have expected it to. There's actually more ways to make non-land, non-token permanents enter than, or non-land permanents, non-creature, non-land. There we go. That's the right combination of words. There's just a lot of ways to do that with food and this, and then yeah, you're probably never paying 5, but if you do, you're going to be happy you just had the ability to do that, and it's fine. And it plays well with Carrot Cake, actually, so there's that, too. Anything interesting? This card being this low is kind of surprising, but not that surprising. This card being below this is surprising, but also Strike Force being this low again, somewhat surprising to me. That card's not that bad. Anything else? No, nothing else for me to talk about in white. So here we see a couple of reasons to be blue. Shoreline Looter is definitely blue's best non-rare. It's just a really strong, it's a 2-drop you have to kill, or on turn 5 of the game you just start drawing 2 cards a turn and killing your opponent. I have drafted many blue decks because of this card. It's definitely my favorite blue card in the set by a lot. It's a really sweet card. It obviously is just really hard to deal with, and it just has all the qualities you would want in a cheap blue creature. This is the type of 2-drop that blue needs to have for it to be a functional color, which is why it's performing so well. Splash Lurker and Mind Whisker are basically the same. Splash Lurker is just a really strong tempo piece. Again, another situation where I've drafted a lot of blue, actually. I've drafted a couple of 4 or 5 blue decks. And these 2 cards have been key components to all of them. Mind Whisker, I have done some very, very sweet things with Mind Whisker. If you have 4 Mind Whiskers on the board, your opponent is just doing nothing for the rest of the game. That is one thing I've learned with Mind Whisker. And it actually is performing very well here. Now, we see that in the opening hand it's terrible, which, again, we know this. That's just going to be true of a lot of blue cards, with the exception of Shoreline Looter. But I think every other blue card is just an atrocious opening hand win rate, because blue, that's where blue's biggest weakness is. is just not having ways to impact the board meaningfully on turn 2. Um, Plume Creed Escort even sort of being below average kind of indicates this. I'm actually shocked that the Wave Rider has a higher win rate than the Plume Creed Escort. That's actually kind of shocking to me. Kind of makes me feel sad feelings, frankly. Anything. Spellgyre is a card to call out. I think this card's good. I'm intrigued to see how it performs for top users. Let's take a look really quickly. There it is. It's actually average for top users. Maybe even slightly above average, actually. So, this card is good. I've liked it a lot. Don't. I guess I would say that if you don't know what you're doing with this card, don't draft it. And what I would say is that you really have to want to counter the spell to counter the spell. You should be surveilling 2 and drawing 2 cards like 70% of the time with this card, I think. I think that's I think 70-30 is kind of the ratio I think you should be at with this card. And I think that's why it's performing so poorly in the aggregate is just people are going to try to just counter spells with this. And 4 mana to counter a spell is just not a good deal. So you really want to try to avoid doing that whenever you can. Even if so, again, in the scenario of turn 4, you're holding this up. Your opponent plays like a 4-drop. It has to be pretty good for me to counter it. Like it has to be Lily Splash Mentor plus. You know what I mean? Like it has to be Lily Splash Mentor or better for me to want to counter that card. I think I pretty much like that's kind of the level of 4-drop that I'm talking about and like needing to be at to actually want to counter this. Anyways, back to what I was doing, which was the blue uncommons for top users. And it is actually useful to look for top users with the with blue specifically because blue is a hard color to play. Anything to talk about there now? Let's go back to everybody and we'll go to black really quickly for uncommons. Thoughtsucker, Warlock, obviously insane. Wix Patrol, similarly. These cards are both very good reasons to get into black. They're very strong. Downwind Ambusher, not and Fell, sort of not quite there, but still pretty good. Again, we see sort of just like all this black removal that is just very efficient and good and just plays well. So removal just seems to be very, very strong in this set, with the exception of a Banishing Light, which is interesting. Not being an instant is kind of a hell of a drug there. Surprised to see Bandit's Talon all the way down here. I think this is just... It's just confusing. I think this card's great. Let me take a look. Yeah, it's still not good here too. Interesting. So let's talk through why that might be the case. Why I think this card's good and other people don't. So your opponent does have a lot of agency over this, right? They can choose to only discard. You're paying 2 mana to make them discard 1 card, and then you're paying more mana, and they have the ability to just have 2 cards in hand a lot of the time. And in some matchups, it's just going to be bad, right? Like if your opponent is a control deck, like you're still 1 for 1ing, which isn't the worst. Like you're still 1 for 1ing a control deck with this, which is why I think it's fine. I think this card does require some help. I don't think it's bad. I certainly do think that its ALS is probably a little high then. I think if you are getting this 5th or 6th, you probably want to take it. It's taken at 6.79. I think this is probably closer to right, as we see a tighter band here. Done this, then like a Huck. I don't think this card's very good at all. My limited experience playing with it, I don't think it's great. This card's definitely bad. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I got to say about black. But it was sort of an interesting thing to think about. Red, and this is why I think part of the reason I think red's the worst color still, is there's not even that many redeeming uncommons. It's just like Rabid now, which is really good. But, I mean, all the other cards are just kind of, like, fine. Thinking about looking at stuff. Playful Shove being this bad, I think a lot of the reason for this is that it's not an instant. This being a sorcery really is a punch on the face. So that's kind of a problem. This card being horrendously bad. If anyone tells you to put this card in your deck, that person is insane. Like, actually crazy. Like, do not listen to those people. There will be people that will tell. There are people that love this style of card for some reason, and I can't figure out why. I really can't tell you. Like, we're gonna look at top users, and it's gonna get worse, I think. Where is it? It's here. Well, top users don't play the card. Okay, great. Smart of them. But like, it's just a complete disaster. Like, these type of like 2 mana things that need time to like heal up. And again, people will tell you that there's like a way to make these type of cards work, and there just never is. So I would strongly recommend never playing this card or cards that look like this card at any point in any format. And yeah, just a lot of like stuff that didn't really work. Like this card being bad, I think is like Wizards made a mistake here because them and myself was like, oh yeah, this card's gonna be good. It turns out this card's awful, and this is where some of the red power was supposed to be at uncommon, and it's just is completely terrible. And so the color is just sort of worse as a result. And finally, we're going to look at green. Green has Hunter's Talent, a card that I have never seen in a pack yet, which is unbelievable. Obviously, it's Elsa's 2.33, which is deserved. It's a very, very strong card. It's one of the best cards in the set. And then followed by Overprotect, another really strong card. The Moose is here, High Spine Wolverine, this thing, a couple of good 2-drops. I mean, and this is all we're getting into like average territories here. Anything to talk about? Clifftop Lookout is a very underperforming card. Indicates a little bit the speed of the format. Indicates that the format is fast. I do also think, the rate's a little too low. I think I missed on this just because I was like, oh, it's, whatever. It's gonna get it's a 3-mana thing that puts a land into play. We've seen that with in MKM we had a 4-mana 2/2 that put a land into play, and that one didn't even give it to you immediately. And this card should be as good as that card. Part of the reason it's not is that it's not a 2/2, so that's kind of big. Like 1/2 is just not big enough. If this were a 2/2, I think it would be considerably better. And part of the reason is that just the format is indeed a little bit fast. So something to keep in mind there. And then really quickly we're going to look at the rares, just in case there's anything to talk about. As of right now, Season of Lost is the winningest rare. Sure, fine, it's mythic. Sword of Fire and Ice, special guest. It's obviously very good. Sophie's still doing well. Yeah, just a lot of. I'm actually just kind of surprised to see Maha up here. It is just like similar with Igor. These are both just cards that just die when you use a removal spell on them, and there's like good reasons to be playing a lot of removal. So, Innkeeper Talent's busted. Is there anything I want to talk about here? Anything that surprises me? Nothing surprising yet. A little surprised to see this up here. Yeah, it's just down there. Okay, I mean, yeah, it's the rares are actually pretty straightforward. We see that 65.5. Again, not the highest, out of bounds we've ever seen. Usually at the start of a format, we see something closer to 70, something usually 68. In this format, rare power level pretty flat down to 60 for Harvest Host, which is currently the last card in Tier 1 for me, but will obviously drop out as the format continues. Yeah, that's all I got to talk about with Bloomburrow. It's been it's been an interesting format so far. Not kind of as expected in a lot of ways. For me, at least, I kind of felt like these were the colors in previous season I felt were going to be good. The Abzan colors, they've been largely very good. The creature type decks associated with those colors, again, have been great. Cheap 2-mana spells. This is a format that is really over-indexed on 2-mana spell power level. So I think 2-drops. It really is 2-drop the format. Like this is, we're not in the 1-drop era anymore. We're in the 2-drop era, and this is 2-drops the format. This is just, that's what the format's all about. If you enjoyed, stick around. There may or may not be more Bloomburrow content. If not, I'll see you at the end of the format when I do my set review. Maybe I'll do some other stuff. Thinking about streaming maybe. See you next time.